So when we're looking at failure, what we're seeing is an experience of achieving something that we didn't consciously choose. Because the unconscious mind doesn't have any emotional attachment to an outcome. It just looks at the instruction sheet, says, okay, I guess we're having a crap day today. And then we succeed in having a crap day, even if it was a good day that we saw through the lens of crap. So when people come to this idea of succeeding, and they say, well, I can't see the steps around me. That's because your reticular activating system has probably kicked in to support your unconscious mind in succeeding at you not seeing the way forward. When we start to develop a relationship to our reality where we're very conscious of what we're moving towards, we've chosen it, we've examined it and made sure that we're in alignment and we really desire it, then we can take those pieces, start to create the alignment, and then we can be supported in moving towards something that unconsciously we also want. And that's when we succeed. We do not succeed at anything that we haven't unconsciously decided to succeed at.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Danielle Mangena, who helps people define and achieve their dream life. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life, to wake up energized, excited about the day, to have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote comes from F.M. Alexander. People do not decide their futures. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. The reality is success is all about the little steps you take, the habits you create, and how often you implement and keep doing them. For example, I've got a habit of going to the gym 3 times a week, and I'm pretty much always there. It's very rare that I break that habit. The result is I'm in great physical shape. And there's plenty of other habits that are like that. So what are the habits that you have that are deciding your future? Take a look and see what they look like. Before we get going, let's review last week's action step, which was, what are the areas of personal growth in your life? Is there something you're missing? Re-engage with that. Re-engage maybe with a hobby or some sort of activity. Remember how Ryan started running in marathons and that opened him up to a whole bunch of new opportunities. Same can happen for you. Quick financial tip for this week. I recently went through some of our bills and our recurring transactions, and I canceled a bunch of them. We sign up for stuff and then we don't use it, and yet we keep paying for it. For annual recurring bills, I use a virtual card from Citibank. Every renewal automatically fails, and I have to take action to renew it. That forces me to decide if it's worth it. You can save thousands of dollars a year, a couple dollars at a time. It's amazing how this stuff adds up. just like our habits, right? Little things compound. All of these themes fit together. So today we have an interesting guest, Daniel Mangena. After receiving a late diagnosis of Asperger's and experiencing what can only be described as a life-shattering trauma at the age of just 20, Daniel spent the next 7 years struggling to keep those revelations and events from spilling into every area of his life. As a result of his struggles, Daniel built a simple 4-step system called Beyond Intention Paradigm. Initially built as a lifeline grappling with suicide thoughts, Beyond Intention was born, transforming Daniel's life from misery to celebration. Through his own struggles, Daniel found a path to lasting joy and purpose, and he wants nothing more to share the tools that saved his life. To that end, he lives by this mission statement: to spearhead an evolutionary uplift in universal consciousness by awakening people to the importance of their unique role. This that is already encoded to them by way of a deep and often ignored or undervalued passion defined as their dream. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Daniel Mangena. It's great to have you join us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
None. I learned by example and osmosis, probably some of the most disastrous tips and tools around money. I've had to forge my own money journey over the time that I've been an adult, and it didn't come without its pitfalls, but definitely didn't learn very much at school, and learned some pretty odd examples of success around money from family.
So you said it sounded like some of the lessons they gave you were actually bad for you. Is that correct? Is that what I understood?
I would definitely say that they weren't the most expensive ones. You know, money is the root of all evil. Just go to university and get a job. Look at the world today, at least where we are right now in 2020 recording this. It's not probably the best and most effective route forward. There's no independence. There was no creating of value. There was no management of money. There was just sort of be a good person, go to work and pay your taxes.
And I think, for decades that kind of worked, but I think that ended decades ago too.
Definitely.
So I'm in my 50s, and I think anyone before me, it worked for, right? But anyone from like my time onward, it became less and less of an opportunity because pensions disappeared. The concept of staying with one company for 30 years disappeared, and the world changed. And so you have to kind of change with it and come up with a new path forward and doing things in a new way.
I think what's happening now, especially with the events of 2020, is we're being forced to see that we can't be dependent on something else. We have to be resourced to have some level of independence. And as a society, I don't think we've been very well trained to do that. We've been trained to look for handouts. And those handouts just really aren't there anymore.
No, they aren't, unless the government dramatically changes and starts handing out money like crazy, like they did a couple months ago. And there is talk of that. But even if that happens, you're going to be stuck in the sense that you will be trapped, and nobody wants to be trapped. You had some interesting things in your history that I kind of want to talk about. One of them is Asperger's. So I know that when I got the email, it talked about that, but can you share a little bit more about what's going on there?
So my journey to my relationship to the autistic spectrum was an interesting one in so much as that before I was diagnosed, nobody knew anything. And then after I was diagnosed, it's like everyone was like, oh yeah, of course you're autistic. It's like, oh, okay, thanks for letting me know. I was really blessed coming off the back of my late diagnosis. I wasn't diagnosed till I was 27 years old. Off the back of that, I just happened to be blessed to be in contact with people that could help me deal with that. So I actually dated a woman who was a teacher in an autistic school. I came upon friends who had family members who'd been who'd been diagnosed early in life. Essentially, I would say that it was easier for me to deal with being on the autistic spectrum because of the balance of autistic versus mainstream traits that I've got. So I've got the capacity to learn systemized things really, really easily. So I just studied social dynamics. And studying social dynamics gave me the framework that I needed to get rid of the social anxiety that I had because I don't have the natural aptitude for being in social settings. So I've been really blessed, to be honest.
We read some blog posts from someone whose name is Penelope Trunk, and she does a lot of the work with personality types, so Myers-Briggs. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember exactly what she says, but I think she's almost got like most of the people with certain personality types. She says they all have Asperger's. And I challenge her because I think what it is they just don't care enough about those social conventions that everyone else says we have to follow. Mm. So I challenge, is it really an autism spectrum thing, or is it just that we're so busy in our own world that we don't care about what other people think?
If we're talking about personalities, definitely. I mean, in my own personal experience, I physically don't have the wiring in my brain to make certain connections naturally. So me having a conversation with someone, it's a very conscious and deliberate process. I need to remember to pause to let the other person speak. My compulsion to put forward my idea or get to the objective needs to come back, learning to listen. So it's actually made me a much better listener and much better engaging because I've practiced and learned those. So they're a very conscious process for me.
And, that's another thing they don't teach in school, how to listen. And how to understand, just like they don't teach money, right? All the things we need in life, they kind of forget to teach you about.
Exactly. Let's learn quadratic equations because you're going to need that, aren't you?
Yeah, they don't even teach you how to do taxes, which is how they get their money.
Because if you understood it, then maybe you'd understand how to optimize your relationship to it.
And that's very true. And you talk about that a little bit. So you wrote a book on money. Mm-hmm. It's called The Money Game, right?
Yeah, The Money Game.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
The Money Game is interesting because essentially what I'm doing is doing some debunking and demystifying the mystical. A lot of people started getting obsessed with the idea of the law of attraction when the book The Secret came out. And a lot of people have made money selling what I believe, to be honest, to be really untrue expressions of what that practice and thought is all about. And so what we do with The Money Game is we take the stuff that actually works and give practical step-by-step guidelines, developing a relationship to the manifestation of money that's repeatable. And it's been repeated time and time and time again. When I do the 5-day challenge that I do every now and then, taking people through the process, you'll see in real time, in a matter of days, people's relationship to money change. I mean, my current record reported is 75,000 Australian dollars manifested in 2 days applying the principles. Versus, the idea that if I just look at my bills and just imagine that they're checks, that something's going to happen. Well, it's not, because we're not just a physical person looking at a bill. We have an emotional relationship to our reality, a belief system associated to our reality. Me just sort of spending every morning feeling good and saying I love money isn't going to change my limiting beliefs around money. And that's not going to change my not having the resources physically in terms of my environment, my skills and my aptitude to deal with money effectively. We need to take all of that into consideration and remember that we're a holistic being that operates on more than just one level of density.
And that's very true. So can you share a little bit more? What is the 5-day challenge?
So during the course of the 5-day challenge that I do around the money game, I step through a bit more of a deeper explanation of what's happening in the steps. So the book basically gets you in, tells you basically how it works, the history of the game that I created, and takes you through the steps to actually apply it and start manifesting money in your life. What I do with the challenge is it's more of an engaging, interactive experience with me taking you through deeper why, deeper application, and we practice over 5 days developing the relationship to manifest an amount. Now, I normally do $10, but what's interesting is that although the goal is just to manifest $10, the average invariably of a challenge is somewhere between $1,800 and $2,500 that people do manifest. But then we get those outliers. We get people that do the tens of thousands or the increasing thousands or hundreds of dollars. But generally speaking, it's around the 1,800, and that's been consistent over the times we've done it and recorded.
And so I struggle with this term of manifesting.
Me too.
So when you use the term, what do you really mean?
Manifestation is one of those words that somebody made up so they can sell courses for $9.97 on Instagram. Personally, that's my belief. When we look at the construction of reality as it's being scientifically demonstrated on more of a consistent basis, everything's manifested and everybody's manifesting all the time, because as we're witnessing our reality and calling it forth, that's it being manifested. When I say manifest, what I'm really talking about is consciously directing the power to create to an outcome that you've consciously chosen. That's what I mean.
So it sounds more like we set a goal and then we start to work towards the goal. We don't just sit here and think about things. We actually do things.
I mean, here's the thing. I believe in infinite possibility and all that kind of good stuff, but infinite possibility doesn't equal probability. Is it possible that I can just sit down on my sofa, pretend that I'm a millionaire, and I'll be a millionaire? It's possible. Is it probable, Rocky? You and I both know. It's not probable, because my emotional relationship to money has to be able to hold that. My mental relationship to money has to be able to hold that. I need to understand the systems and physical workings of money in order to be able to hold that. Look at lottery winners. 90% of them go back to exactly where they were within 5 years, because they may have had that temporary blip where they were able to manifest millions of dollars, but invariably their emotional state takes hold and becomes the default once again. Their belief system, the mental processes that they go with as a result of that go back, and their inability to know how to handle the physical manifestation of money reverts them back to a default, and they end up broke.
And that's true. We see that time and time again, that people they don't have the greatest relationships with money. And it comes back to what you talked about at the beginning, right? They told you money was the root of all evil. Well, you walk around with that and you're going to stay away from money. That's just the reality of it.
Exactly.
That is very, very true. So you have a couple other books too. I think one is called Stepping Beyond Intention.
Yeah.
So what is that book about?
Stepping Beyond Intention talks about my model for how we relate to our reality. So looking at alignment, as I've spoken about a few times here in our chat today, being aligned in how we feel and what we do to create an outcome. And also taking the idea of goals and making them an intention, which is adding a sense of do to it, giving life to that goal so that it actually becomes something we're moving towards rather than something that we're just writing down or that we're just thinking about, and how you can direct the relationship between all of these pieces to start creating the life that you want. That's what I talk about in Stepping Beyond Intention.
And it keeps coming back. I keep hearing this theme of you actually have to do the work.
Rocky, can you believe it? We have to do something.
Well, and I think a lot of people, what I find is that, number one, they've never given the space and the time to define their dreams and to define their life of what they want. And then I think that the biggest second thing that comes up is people don't know how to take the first step. And so they struggle. It's like, okay, I want to go here to the top of this mountain, but what do I do today? What advice do you have for them? How do we get from, hey, here's my dream. What do I do today?
So I talk about a concept in my work called micro-shifting. And micro-shifting came as an idea, interestingly, when I was doing a Tony Robbins event 5 or 6 years ago. And he was talking about massive action. But then at the same time, he spoke about this idea of, we're in London. He said, if a plane takes off from London, it's heading to Buenos Aires, but it's just 2 degrees off and follows that path consistently, it ends up in New York. And something hit home with me with that, because 2 degrees is not a big thing. 2 degrees is really, really small. But that small shift, when consistently held, can lead to a big result. And then I thought, well, what if we compound the effect of a series of these shifts? And then I started thinking about baby steps. And I started thinking about resistance, and I started thinking about our belief systems. And I came to this idea that I've practiced since then, and people have found to be very effective over the years. It's, if I take a consistent series of baby steps in the direction of a consciously chosen outcome, the probability of me getting there goes up. Why? First and foremost, the resistance that we get from the quantum leap is not there. So my limiting beliefs that normally hold me back, the procrastination over the thought of the big endeavor, doesn't hold me back. The pattern, and therefore the mental ingraining of failure that comes from me saying I'm going to start and not starting, is gone. And instead, I've got a new momentum energy, which compounds and gives me more movement forward. So what I often say to people when they say, what do I do, is, what's one step that you can make in the direction of it that you know you can do? What's the minimum deliverable, something that you know there's not going to be any resistance to? And take that step. And then ask yourself, what's the next step in the right direction? Take it and celebrate. And then what's the next step? Take it and celebrate. Now you're micro-shifting, you're taking a consistent series of baby steps. And that's just an easier trajectory to hold. If I take a big leap and I have a back step, the gap between where I am and where I was is a big one. I come back there, that's a big failure that I can potentially end up facing, versus a micro shift. If I have a little step back, okay, that wasn't too big a step back. I can get back in the saddle and keep going. And then eventually I will get there.
Life is pretty simple. Doing simple is hard.
Definitely.
And it's true for kids too, because the amount of baby steps that are right around you that are so simple to take, and yet most people just don't take them. And it always, I think it's a twofold thing. Number one, I see a lot of people can't even see the step that they could do easily.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess there's friction of why they don't just take the step.
Mm.
And I don't know why, but a lot of times when I was doing coaching, it was like, we don't make big changes. We don't make these, big leaps. We take little teeny steps, and they continue to compound, because compounding always works.
Mm-hmm.
It works in both directions. And if you just keep showing up, taking a little step, refining, changing course constantly, because you're constantly changing course, then you will get there. But you have to define the outcome. Until you know what your outcome is, you can take baby steps and you might be going the wrong direction.
I agree completely. And there are two pieces to that I just want to pick up on. Joaquin, I think that a lot of people aren't getting somewhere because deep down they don't really want to get there. The mind is a perfect executing machine. And the sooner that we kind of come back to understanding that the mind doesn't actually fail at anything. If you think about it, the unconscious mind does not fail at anything. What happens is it succeeds at something that we don't want. So when we're looking at failure, what we're seeing is an experience of achieving something that we didn't consciously choose. Because the unconscious mind doesn't have any emotional attachment to an outcome. It just looks at the instruction sheet, says, okay, I guess we're having a crap day today. And then we succeed in having a crap day, even if it was a good day that we saw through the lens of crap. So when people come to this idea of succeeding, and they say, well, I can't see the steps around me. That's because your reticular activating system has probably kicked in to support your unconscious mind in succeeding at you not seeing the way forward. When we start to develop a relationship to our reality where we're very conscious in what we're moving towards, we've chosen it, we've examined it and made sure that we're in alignment and we really desire it, then we can take those pieces, start to create the alignment, and then we can be supported in moving towards something that unconsciously we also want, and that's when we succeed. We do not succeed at anything that we haven't unconsciously decided to succeed at.
When you say alignment, what do you mean by that?
Generally speaking, when I'm talking about alignment, and I use it in a general term, I'm saying two things being in accord. So let's say that I want to be successful, right? I want to have a successful business. That means that mentally I need to be aligned with the idea of success. If my thoughts are a failure, there is a disconnect, and that lack of alignment will not create success. It will create failure, When I talk about alignment in my work. I'm talking about the alignment in what I feel, my emotional state, my emotional capacity to have what I'm moving towards, mental, my belief systems, my ideas, the narratives and the stories that I'm running, and then action. What am I doing? I can say I want to be successful all I want. I can do one of those happy clappy morning videos as much as I want, meditate 10 hours every morning. If I don't actually get up and take steps towards success or act as a successful person, I'm not going to succeed.
Do people sit around and meditate for 10 hours a day?
I know people that do that, Rocky. I actually know people that do that and then wonder why their life is still crap.
Oh. Do they get clear? Like, do they do it for a long, long time, or is it like a short stint? And by short, it could be maybe a year, or is it like years upon years?
I know people, maybe not necessarily even 10, but I know people that I've known for years, like years, that meditate 3, 4, 5 hours every morning.
Huh. Are they actually meditating, or are they just being lazy?
Most of them are doing guided meditation. Some are doing transcendent meditations, TM, but actually doing actual meditation practice.
Okay. And that's probably why you tell people to stop meditating, right?
One of the reasons, yes.
Well, what are some of the other reasons?
Because your practice of meditation, shock horror, just might not be aligned with how you expand and level up the expression of yourself at a conscious level. Like your spiritual practice might not necessarily be meditation. You may not be aligned with that practice. Maybe you should be spending more time in nature, and that's how you're going to connect. Maybe you should be dancing. Maybe you should be, I don't know, laughing. There's laughing meditations you can do. I think this obsession with looking at what the mainstream says has to be the way, instead of you having a conscious relationship to what you're doing and choosing something that's actually aligned with you, is why a lot of people aren't finding any fulfillment or expansion from their practice.
How do you figure out, though, what's going to align to you?
By examination.
So you've got to test out different things, see what works, see what doesn't, and be intentional with the decision of what you want to do.
If you want to succeed, I would say so, yes, and I could be wrong. But the evidence that I've gathered from my own experience and from those I've worked with over the years, and over the people I've observed over the last 20 years I've been around personal development and spirituality, has kind of been consistent with that fact that those who see for themselves what is going to work for them and are deliberate consistently get the result of actually moving forward. Everyone else is kind of potluck.
So you've mentioned spirituality a couple times. What does spirituality mean to you?
Spirituality for me is a mainstream word. You'll notice that there'll be like my relationship to a word or an idea in terms of how the world sees it and my own personal relationship. Personally, I see spirituality as just an exploration of the aspect of ourselves that we deem to be spiritual, or that non-physical aspect of ourselves. Some call it energy, some call it, vibe, but that can actually be measured. There are devices that allow us to measure that. So we know it's real. For me, spirituality is the relationship to that aspect of ourselves and that aspect of reality.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. I don't think most people have tried to get it measured or even have used any kind of measurement systems to figure out how that works. What are some of the more easier to access ways to do that?
You can even look at one thing that you can do is you can look at how spirituality in fact impacts you physically. So I think it do a headset that allows you to measure how your brain waves change when you're in different types of activity. So you can see that when you're meditating, your brain waves actually change. So there's a physical impact of what you're doing spiritually.
Okay. It's interesting. I haven't done any of those types of things. I probably have to find a place, but I don't know that there's anyone near here that would even do something
I can
like
definitely
that.
get you access to like some free resources you can use to sort of have a peek down that rabbit hole. But as I say with everyone, the reason why I say stop meditating is because it's easy to get seduced by the sexiness of all of that and get lost in it and actually be an excuse for you not to take action, versus you taking the power of this beautiful aspect of reality in ourselves and allowing it to empower us to have a more bountiful physical experience.
Interesting. I know one of the things you talk about is being present. And I know in our world today, most people have a very hard time with this because you are constantly being having your attention pulled away through social media, through a multitude of things going on. Do you have certain practices or ways that you help people to become present?
So I've actually got a tool that I created as a free tool that people can get. It's a visualization. It's not very long. It's a few minutes, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. It takes you through a process of actually disconnecting from what's going on outside of you and reconnecting with what's happening inside of you, getting into a state called heart coherence. The Heart Math Institute have done a lot of research into this, which is just basically creating a state whereby you're more relaxed, you've got more access to yourself, the brain waves change, your physiology changes, the chemistry in the body changes. That's a really great tool that I share with people that's accessible. You know, you pop that MP3 on, 3-4 minutes later, your experience of reality can change. But it does demand of us that we actually follow through on that. You know, otherwise you can come off of that and go exactly back to where you were before by making the choice to go back to thinking what you were thinking before and go back to feeling what you're feeling before. What we're doing with my visualization is creating space for you to be deliberate in choosing what your new emotional state is, what your new thought quality is, and that gives you access to new physical choices and therefore new outcomes.
So you're saying people go back to their previous behaviors. How do you ensure that they don't? Is it how do they ensure that they move a different direction?
It's all coming down to choice, I feel. Okay. If we look at our experience, generally speaking, I think studies show 90 to 95% of our day is spent running on unconscious programs. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the time we're going to be running on the unconscious mind. But we do have access through that time that we're conscious to choosing where we're at. Emotional states can be chosen. My friend Dr. Ann Jensen got her PhD from Oxford University, actually demonstrating how we can move into different emotional states. She's got great work. I think her website's heartspeak.com. Great work and tools around changing in your emotional state. We know that's possible. We know that there are tools such as hypnosis and other tools that allow us to change our thought patterns. So we can actually change those things. And when we look at that, our thought quality is affected by emotional state. Our choices physically are affected by our thought quality. If we have a handle on the inner environment of our emotional state and our thought quality, we have new choices and therefore different outcomes.
Can people do all this work alone, or do they need help?
Depends on the person, you know. If you look at Gretchen Rubin's work with the 4 tendencies, I'm sure you're familiar with the book.
I am.
Different people in different groups have got different ways of relating to an intention that they have for their life. If we're talking about someone who fits into her obliger model, where they need outside accountability in order to move forward, because they don't hold up to inner accountability or inner expectations, then that person should definitely seek the counsel of a coach or a mentor, or definitely have an accountability buddy. Someone like me, who's a rebel type, probably best that I do just work by myself or work with somebody that is very familiar with how to extract from me a relationship to my freedom desire, because otherwise it's going to put me off and I'm actually going to go backwards. So I think it depends on the person, to be honest.
So the rebel type is the one that had the largest chapter in the book. They're the most difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
How does one work with a rebel?
So for me, it was really interesting. So I had a fitness coach, and they would keep saying to me, okay, how many times are you going to work out this week so I could hold you accountable? And I ended up having to end the relationship with the coach, because what ended up happening is I'd have to go do all of this inner work to overcome the resistance that I had to exercising, just because they told me that they wanted to hold me accountable to exercising. Versus when I'm working with the rebel, inviting them to reconnect with their why and putting them in choice and helping them to see that it's what they really want to do, not me telling them it's something that they have to do.
Yeah, my son's a rebel. I get it. Like, we know. I've heard her speak, and and I've seen her book, and it's quite interesting. And trying to figure out the way to help people see that is, especially for rebels, is a very difficult thing.
Yeah.
Not easy to do. One of the other books that you wrote was From Time to Time. So it is essentially about, I guess, a time management system in helping people to take control of it.
I would say, so from time to time, what the title actually gives insight into is I'm saying move from time management to time mastery. It's about creating abundance in our time and giving some strategies to doing that. I'm actually going to be, over the winter, I'm doing a rewrite of all my books. I'm going to be bringing some more of the alignment work into the time mastery work that we talk about from time to time. But it is essentially about creating abundance in your time so that you can go out and create more of what you desire.
We all have a finite time. So how do you create abundance with time?
By not tying up your time with things that you don't need to be doing, and to breaking your relationship of addiction to doing things that aren't even adding to your experience anyway. So being deliberate in the direction of what we do with the time that we have, and actually remembering that there are people who will find joy in being more efficient and effective in some of these tasks that we're probably wasting time doing ourselves.
It's funny because I think a lot of people struggle to say, I want someone to clean my house, or I want a landscaper, or some of those other types of things. But putting a value on time and then saying, if what I'm doing doesn't meet that value or isn't enjoyable, then that's something that needs to get outsourced.
Definitely.
And let somebody else handle it so that you are not stuck dealing with it. So you said you're rewriting all your books. What has changed, or what have you learned that's causing you to go back and rewrite everything?
Well, I'm constantly learning. Like you, I'm an avid reader. I'm constantly learning, expanding. And I think there's been some big leaps for myself as I've taken some big leaps in my life recently. I'm going to be a new father. I've got a baby on the way. So I've got different relationships to the ideas of legacy, for example. I've done a lot of progressive work on training in some new modalities, which I think have got something to add to what I've said before. From Time to Time was the first book that I actually put out and published. I self-published. And that book was 4 years ago now. It's a long time ago. There's a lot of things that have changed. And I'd like to add some more of the work around abundance and more of the work that I've learned from the coaching and mentoring that I've received, so I can pass that on to my readers.
And you read a lot, don't you? How many books do you generally read per month?
Generally 4 to 5 books a month. And that's a combination of reading them. I use Audible as well in order to consume information. But I shoot for a book a week, and I've done that for about 5 or 6 years. Before that, I was reading more consistently even.
And in order to do that, you have to schedule it, right? You create time on your calendar to be able to do these types of things. Because I think a lot of people are like, how am I supposed to do all of this?
There's a couple of ways to do it. If a book's a bigger book, for example, I remember when I saw it on your bookshelf, Money Master the Game, that's a really big book. So I knew that was probably going to take me a couple of weeks. And I actually said, well, this book is bigger. I'm going to do that one then as an Audible and make notes as I go along so that I can do it, for example, when I'm active, as I'm driving, as I'm on the train, and then stop it and make notes on the Audible. And then every weekend I sit down and I review what I've read that week, and I pull the notes and I put them in my notebook and see where to integrate them. So essentially, normally what I do is pick up the book, I see how many pages it is and divide it over 7. And that gives me a target of how many pages I need to read every day. And then I create space I've got space in my day that I can pop into that reading. Generally, I like to read before I go to bed. I like to read early in the morning. I don't really like to read during the day. If it's a thinner, shorter book, I'm going to just give myself a lower target and just leave it for the evening. If I finish the book early, maybe I'm going to go and do an audiobook, and then spend the rest of the week doing that book. If it's going to be a bigger book like Money, which I think did take me just over 2 weeks, then I'll juxtapose that with another book at the same time, generally one that's along the same ideas or that's going to add to the book that I'm reading, and that means that I'll get them all done and hit my target every month.
And you have a target, you measure against it, you plan it out, and then you just do it.
Execute.
Execute. There's that word, right? People need to execute much more often and do all of the things, and they wonder why they don't get stuff done because they don't plan it out and do all of these things. It's
or they're blaming someone else or giving someone else the power and responsibility to affect it.
Correct. Well, congratulations. Is this your first child?
Yes, it's my first child. I've got a stepdaughter, but this is my first where I've put some ingredients in the cake also. Okay.
Have you thought about how you're going to raise your child and what you want them to learn and how you're going to design that whole experience?
I realized that I'm probably not going to have as much say as I think I'm going to have. That I'm prepared for how unprepared I'm going to be for the experience. And at the end of the day, it's going to be his journey. And all I can do is create an environment for him to get the most out of that journey and set a good example for how he can develop a level of mastery to move into what he wants to create in his journey. And that's what I'm going to be seeking to do. A loving, safe environment for him to just be free and experience this thing that we call life.
So I'll give you a book recommendation. It's called The Well-Trained Mind. I don't know if you've read that one yet.
I haven't done, but I definitely want it.
So kids go through 3 different phases, actually 4 phases, but the first phase is 0 to 6, 0 to 5, 0 to 6. They're learning how to essentially live life, standard basic skills of walking, talking, eating, using the bathroom. Survival skills. And then 6 to 12 is just sponging knowledge and in understanding all of the different knowledge that's out there. And then 12 to 18 is literally the skill of taking that knowledge, deciding who you are, and then being able to use it to get what you want. That's why teenagers all argue, right? Because that's that stage of life of kind of breaking through and figuring you out. And the book lays it all down very, very nicely. And it kind of shows how each stage needs the parent to adjust to the stage. And I think too often we don't adjust properly. At least that's what I see with a lot of parents raising their kids. The wrong methods for the particular stage the child is in. And so you just need to be intentional with that. So when you've worked with people and you see people who've been stuck for a long time and they finally break through, what's kind of like the key or the one thing that has to happen that allows people to be able to break through and take the next step?
I would say definitely step 1 of my Beyond Intention model, which is accepting responsibility for what they actually have created up until now, and then the responsibility for what's going to come next. Anytime that someone gets somewhere, it's because that idea has clicked in my experience.
People don't like responsibility.
No, because then they can't blame everyone.
And that's what we spend our time, right? We're always blaming somebody else for what. And that's the problem with the rebels. They're always blaming somebody else.
Definitely.
They never take responsibility. That's been the biggest struggle, I think, that we see with that one. But little by little, you get there and you've got to find the place. So what have we not touched upon that people need to know?
I really don't know. I think we've really covered a lot of ground. I think this has been a really rich conversation for which I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have with you. And I think if people just start taking action on even just one thing that they can pull from here, then they're going to start to see a marked difference in their life. And if they can take that marked difference, celebrate it, integrate it, and look to what the next step will be, the next thing to integrate and apply, then there'll be more of a difference, and before long they'll have a new life.
And see, it's funny because my next question to you is, what's one action step people can take this week? You've already answered it, right? Is pick an area, take one area and start working on it and integrate it. And that makes total sense. Well, that's awesome. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Choosing and being aligned with it. That's it. Choosing.
You have to choose the life you want, and you should choose something you like. I just thought that would be natural, but you say that you have to love it. There's
conscious choice and unconscious choice. I mean, take an unconscious choice and imprint that at the unconscious level so that it becomes what we actually want.
And I think that's why people struggle, because they pick somebody else's life instead of their own, right? I want to be so-and-so instead of saying, I want to be me, and figuring out what the me is.
Definitely.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
That people don't care about you as much as you think they do. People probably aren't talking about you as much as you think they're talking about you. And they're probably preoccupied with their own life. So just get on and do what makes you happy.
And that is so true. And I think for a lot of people, it takes them 40, 50 years to figure that one out. And so the faster you realize that nobody else cares, and the faster that you can also accept your screw-ups. If you fight the screw-up, it makes it worse. If you accept the screw-up and you own it, you take away everyone else's power to hold it against you.
Definitely.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
The government's not going to save you. Santa Claus is not going to save you. Your guru is not going to save you. Why not remember that you're powerful enough to save yourself?
And your mom and dad aren't going to save you either. They might spoil you, which is not saving you. That's creating a whole nother issue of being dependent on someone else.
Definitely.
Very true. If people would like to find you, connect, learn more about your books, what is the best way for them to do that?
Best place is dreamwithdan.com, my website. Everything's there, my podcasts, books, any free workshops that are coming up, the free resource that I told you guys about earlier in terms of the heart center visualization, that's on the free resources page. Dreamwithdan.com is just where everything is.
And I will put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Rocky. It's really been a pleasure. And to any of my listeners that are tuning into this, be sure to check out the rest of Rocky's work, especially the entrepreneurs. Rocky's doing some great stuff. I personally am going to be reaching out to him for some of my needs. I encourage you to do so too.
And thank you for that. I appreciate it. We didn't dig into it. It just amazes me how inspiring it is that Dan overcame his Asperger's, and he didn't let it hold him back from his dreams. As we always say, life is simple, but doing simple is hard. Everyone needs to define what you want from life and then keep moving forward towards it. We're not going to be on course most of the time, but as long as we're moving toward the target, we can eventually hit it. Daniel's overcome a lot, and we can too if we choose to. Are you being held back by your story, or are you ready to break through the barrier? What are you doing to move forward? You've got to create the time and schedule the time to do what it is that you want. This week's action step was to take one area of your life and start working on it. Just pick one. Life is about baby steps. Take them little by little, and then we succeed. And yes, we fall on the way to our success, but you just get back up and you keep going. The reality is nothing happens until you take action. And the more you take, the easier it becomes. It's like a snowball rolling down the hill and building momentum over time. Next week, we have on Sandra Francisco to share how to turn a job loss into your greatest achievement. The reality is any loss we encounter can be turned around to success. If you like today's show, please share it. Tag me on social media. I would appreciate that. Thanks for listening, Have an abundant week.